right, here we go. This is the first ever Remote Creative Podcast. I am your host, Steve Reed, a 20 plus year veteran of the creative industry with all of the victories and scars to prove it. So I want to give you a little bit of background of what this podcast is about and what exactly a remote creative is. If you are in or interested in the creative industry, you enjoy shows about business, strategy, stories from the thick of things, then you might want to hit that follow button and join us on this journey. So what exactly is a remote creative? Well, remote means at a distance, and creative means creative agency, an agency that offers a variety of services that fall under the umbrella of marketing and advertising. So remote creative is also a name for my online course that I'll be releasing here soon that will help people start their own creative agency, just, offering things like websites, logos, and print services. So working on that now, going to release it soon. Super excited about that. So it's for people with little to no experience, but who are interested in running a business like this. So for today, I just want to tell you my background and my story. And when I look back on my life, it's been absolutely nuts. I'm not sharing this to kind of brag about everything I've done. I'm not trying to flex on everyone here because it has been full of insanity and failures, but I think there's something we can learn from this. I want to share a little bit about what I learned, but I think it'll be interesting to maybe hear my personal journey. I think it's pretty unique, as I guess all of ours are unique, but mine starts back in 1991 with a book cover contest. So back in this time period, I was pretty good at art. I was kind of known for drawing pictures and having my own comic strips and cartoons. I was real into Calvin and Hobbes and The Far Side. Those were my two favorites. And loved living in the area where I could see a brand new Calvin and Hobbes comic strip hit the paper every morning and just wait for those big Sunday newspapers where it's just plastered right there and see what Calvin and Hobbes are going to do next and what kind of insanity they're going to get into. So 11 years old, I entered this book cover contest. My art teacher suggested that I enter it, and I'd never won anything before. I wasn't really an outstanding kid. I didn't have athletic talent. I didn't have academic talent, but I could draw pretty well. Not as good as some other kids at school, but I was pretty decent and I enjoyed it and I loved it. So I said, all right, I'm going to take a swing at this art contest. And so I designed this piece. Back in the day, I don't know if they still do this, but they would hand out book covers and ours were sponsored by the local bus company. And so usually you could color the book covers or they'd have a design on them, but you would wrap them around your books to protect them because, kids destroy things. And so it kept the books in good shape. And so I designed this book cover and it's actually hanging on my wall right now in my office. I've got it sitting there because that was the catalyst to my life. And I just can remember this is where it all started. So I entered this, they told me there was something like 16,000 applicants. And I remember walking into my classroom and my art teacher's standing there and he's got this excited look on his face. And he goes, "Steve, you won." And I was a little bit blown away. I was like, "Oh, I did? Like, well, what place did I get?" He goes, "You won first place. You won the whole contest." And I was blown away. I didn't know what to think. Nothing like this had ever happened before. I had no idea what to do. All the other kids in the class were looking at me and I was astounded by this because the first prize was a $3,000. This is 1991. It was a $3,000 IBM compatible 386. It was running Windows 3.1 and DOS. And you guys remember DOS? I used to play Red Baron, Wolfenstein, and Doom. Start those up right out of DOS. If you don't know those days, they were awesome. So I was introduced to Microsoft Paint, and it blew my mind. And I would paint these really detailed pictures of spaceships and aliens and all kinds of stuff. But I was going through pixel by pixel to create gradients and other effects. Like I would make stars and I would do these kind of gradients and try to illustrate these things and you really had no business doing in Microsoft Paint, but it's all I had. And so I did the best with the tools that I had at the time. And that actually taught me a lot. That taught me that the perceived limitations of something, you may not even really realize how much you could do with a particular tool unless you get in there and you fight hard to kind of really push the limits of what you could do with a particular tool. There was another program I got called Animation Works, and I would make these little cartoons. So I'd make flip books as a kid, right? And I'd have these flip books where a guy's face would peel off and there'd be an alien underneath, and then you'd zoom into his eyeball, and we do all kinds of stuff like that. And so I would make these cartoons, and I had this little character called I-Man. He looked like a lowercase I, and he was green, and bad stuff would always happen to him. He'd get chopped in half, his head would explode. And he didn't have a good life, but he was a trooper. So all this animation work that I was doing would actually come into play later in life. But at that point in time, it was just kind of a novelty, something fun I would do after I came home from school. Then I remember this guy my dad knew. He was an entrepreneur. He actually ran his own internet service provider that was providing dial-up service. And this guy was an entrepreneur. I was super inspired by this guy. He started his own movie rental business. And inside of his business, he had these like plywood arcades that he built, but he had a TV in there with like a Nintendo. And so you could just go and pay $5, and for a whole hour, you would just play Nintendo games instead of these arcade games. So he built his own arcade. He raced. I learned there was this thing where people do drag races with these little tiny electric cars. It was this whole sport. There was a magazine and everything. And so he had this drag strip where people would come in and race these little electric cars. And so he had this business where he's doing all these different things and running an internet service provider. And at his little shop there, or his movie rental place, he has a computer set up, and he goes, "Have you ever seen this program called Photoshop?" And I'd never heard of it before. And he goes, "Okay, so here's a photo." And he goes, "Watch this." And he gets I think it's like the smudge tool, and he smudges something. And I was blown away. He's like, "It's just like you're taking your thumb and smudging pencil when you're drawing, but you can do it digitally now." I was blown away. And so he got me a shareware version, I think, of Photoshop 2.0, put that on my computer. And man, I was doing all kinds of stuff with that. I was putting pictures of my pet iguana's head on my sister. I was blown away that you had layers and you had all these tools. It was amazing software, and I would use it constantly, and I would create all kinds of cool things in Photoshop. And so that was pretty amazing. So I'm building all of these skills over the years, these digital skills in kind of the 90s, when nobody else I knew at the time had a computer like that. And we were not at all wealthy people. There's no way we could have afforded something like that. And so to have that at that time was a huge advantage. And so, anyway, I'm 13 years old. My dad starts taking me to trade shows to kind of show me all these other entrepreneurs. And I would take business cards with me. He goes, "You need to make you some business cards and sell your illustration and logo services." So that's what I did. I'd go out and hand out my business cards, and I'd say, "Hey, I'm Steve Reed. I design logos. I also do illustrations and cartooning." And I still have some of those little green business cards with me. One's up there on my shelf. I'm going to make a picture on my wall, and I'm going to have all the different business cards from all my different enterprises over the years. So, I'm going to trade shows, and one of my first clients was actually that guy who had the ISP. I did his logo for him. And then I did a logo for an oil change place. I did a logo for some small businesses, and I did portraits. I would illustrate Marvel trading cards like Wolverine. I would draw those and sell them at school. So I kind of had my own little hustle going on as a kid. Then I decided to go on a 2-year-long mission for my church. And a week before I left, I had done a logo for a local radio station. It was the last one I did before I left. And I saw a billboard up as I was driving through downtown. There's a billboard put up there, and it was advertising just in text with a red background, this new radio station. And I'd been listening to their music, and they were playing all the music that I really liked. I was like, man, this is my favorite radio station. I love it. So I called them up. I said, hey, I noticed on your sign there was no logo there. Do you guys have a logo? And they said, no, we don't have one yet, which I thought was kind of weird. But I said, hey, I like your music so much, I'll design one for you for free. I wanted a big client like that, and I was willing to do the work for free just to get it. I was about to leave on a mission. It's like, hey, if I could sneak this one in there, that would be really cool to do. So I went and visited with them. They told me what they were looking for, and I came back and I designed probably 30 logos. And I had one that was my absolute favorite. And so I showed them all these different logos, and they chose my favorite. And they kept that logo for well over a decade until I think they sold and changed their name, became something else. But they asked, well, how much do we owe you for your logo? And I said, well, I told you I would do it for free. I'm a man of my word. And so, I just am happy to provide it and know that that's my work there. And they said, well, and I told them I was leaving on a mission and everything. And so they said, well, hey, how about this? For the next 2 years, we'll just save all of the best CDs that come out. We get all these CDs. We'll save all these CDs for you, and then you can have them when you get back. And I was like, all right, that sounds great. So I got all these. So I had this giant box of CDs when I got home. So, then what followed is a 2-year stretch that wasn't all about me, but was about helping and serving other people. And it was fantastic. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. There was a lot of heartache and sacrifice. My dad taught me how to work hard, doing manual labor, construction, lawn maintenance. And I learned, 2 vital skills had been with me at this point in my life. Hard work and a love for serving others. And those are 2 great things. I learned some management out there as well. I managed other groups of missionaries and had some great leadership opportunities. But then it was time to come home, and it was time to start. I was 21 years old, and I had nothing. I was starting from literal scratch. And because in the mission field, I lived off a mere $130 a month in personal spending money. That's all I had, $130 a month to buy groceries and lunch and things like that. And that money came from my own family, and I had worked essentially, pretty much for free for my dad all of those years, but it was kind of trade out. They would cover my mission fees if I help with a family business. So that's what I did. But here I was with the whole world in front of me and no idea what to do. So I went back to working construction with my dad because it was there, and I was staying at home at the time. And so it just made sense to start from there since I had nothing. So I worked with him for maybe about a year, and then I decided I wanted to try to get into a job doing graphic design because I was still passionate about that. And I was active in my church, and I had an opportunity there to provide kind of the young singles group I was in with posters, advertising like dances and events and all kinds of things. I was making these little pass-along cards, and I was doing all this graphic design work for church stuff. And that became my portfolio to then walk into this position that was open for working at a phone book doing ads. And it was not a glamorous job, but I had this whole portfolio of this church work that I did. They saw I had skills and knew the software, so they hired me. And so that got me out of doing that manual labor and into an air-conditioned environment, which I was very grateful for. It was the first time I'd ever had a job inside of like a building where I wasn't out in the hot sun sweating. And my work there, like I said, was not very glamorous. I was doing these single space ads, which are in kind of the yellow pages area of a phone book. They're just text only ads that you're very restricted in what you can do creatively. But I was producing about 40 of these ads a day, and they were happy because I guess they had 2 people who had my job before. And with the both of them, they were producing like 25 a day. So I was almost doubling the output of 2 people before. So I felt like I had a pretty solid position, and I was looking for the opportunity to kind of moving up and doing some other types of work. Started college part-time, and I really didn't have any more than a couple $100 in my bank account at any given time. I was barely scraping by, and I really had no idea where I was going to go from there until I met a guy who came up to me and he goes, "Hey, I have a business opportunity for you." And he goes, "I think you would do really good in this business." And it was doing financial planning. He was fairly new to it as well. His dad was experienced, but he kind of invited me into it. And I did some research and I thought, hey, this might be a really good thing for me, but it's not really what I want to do. But I would make more money potentially here. And, it could be interesting. And so, but I had this problem where I was working at this phone book and it was hard to kind of give up an existing job. And I felt like they were relying on me there. And so I was kind of torn. So, I thought about it and, I thought and I prayed about it and whatnot. And then just 2 days later, the boss over there calls me in the office, says, "Hey, we're going to have to let you go. A new person's coming in, they're restructuring everything and they don't need your position anymore." And I said, "Oh, great." She was a little surprised by that, but I said, I had another opportunity I was wanting to jump on. So this is great timing. So I exited that business and started this kind of entrepreneurial life of trying to make this financial planning business work. To be honest with you, I wasn't really good at it. My talents still lied and my passion still lied with doing design and creating things. And so, I struggled a little bit with that. But then my kind of business partner, colleague, his dad came to me and he said, "Hey, you do graphic design, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, we've been doing these mailers for dinner seminars, these direct mail pieces, and they're really expensive and we don't really like the results that we're getting. We're looking at doing some ourselves, but we need them designed. Can you design some for us?" And I was thrilled at this opportunity. I was like, "Yeah, of course, I'll do it. Let's do it." So I sat down, I designed them, and we did our first mailer, and it was phenomenal. We got amazing results from it, and we started doing more and more, and other people started hearing about it, and they said, "Hey, could you do one for us too? We'll pay you." So then the guy who brought me into the company, we said, let's start a business. Let's start a printing business, selling these services to other agents in this company. We will basically have a monopoly of all these agents because we're agents like them and they're right there and we can easily get more people. So we went to Sam's Club. We bought 30 Canon printers. They were $50 a piece at Sam's Club. These just plain old printers. And we set up this array of printers. And my buddy, he knew a lot about computers and stuff. So he wired them all up to 2 different computers. And we had a print shop going on. And I built a website, a very rudimentary website through, what was it? It was some early Microsoft program that you could use to build websites. We figured out some things, how to actually make a website happen, and we advertised our services there. So we had this business up and running, and we were excited about it, and we were actually making some money from it, and it was a really thrilling time. The only problem is those guys were our only clients. And so what ended up happening is that company collapsed and all of our clients went bye-bye. And so we just sat there, empty-handed, wondering what to do now. And it was pretty devastating to us. My buddy decided he was going to go in another direction. And I decided I was going to start my own graphic design business. I had no idea how I was going to do it, but I had some skills and I was going to take the skills I learned from doing the print work and I was going to turn them into a new graphic design business of my very own. So that's what we did. And somewhere around this time, I got married. She definitely didn't do it for the money, but we worked together, and it was really fun kind of being a young, struggling couple doing those things. We delivered phone books, we did odd jobs. When my wife was pregnant with our first child, she went to work. She was working, doing finance for my uncle. And we were just kind of barely scraping by. It was kind of crazy times, but it was good for us. And one of my favorite stories to tell about that is it was Friday and we wanted to go see a movie, but we had hardly any money. And when I say hardly any money, we had $1.97, and there was a $1 movie theater in town, and it was exactly $1 to go see a movie, no tax or anything. So we needed 3 cents to go on a date to see a movie. So we went searching the parking lots of gas stations and a hospital and other businesses looking for change. And we found our 3 pennies and we went and saw our movie. And we were so excited about that at the time because we accomplished it. And it was so ridiculous. It was so ridiculous how poor we were that it was funny. And, but that's kind of where things were for a long time, just struggling and struggling. I even spent 20 days selling vacuum cleaners door to door. Oh my gosh. I tried to help the company with some of the skills that I had do things better, but they were unwilling to change, and they didn't know, none of us really knew a lot about business, but there were certain things that you just don't do and certain things you can do better. And anyway, they kind of cheated me out of money. They said they were going to pay me. That didn't end up working out. So after all of this, I'm sitting there at my computer and I'm staring at the screen for 3 days and I have no idea what I'm going to do. I'm just like, where do I go from here? What can I possibly do at this point? Little did I know that I was sitting right at the edge of a decision that would change my life forever. And as I was looking through, I remember one of the companies that we had gotten stock photography from for some of our print stuff. It was called iStock Photo. Obviously, iStock is still there, but this was way back in the day. They had this, I have a screenshot of the website of how it was in that day. It's kind of funny to look back on it, but I went in there and I said, well, I'm going to see if I could sell some of my illustration work. So I had gotten pretty good with Adobe Illustrator, and I was going to take some of my characters from my sketchbooks, and I took a couple of heads that I had, and I just kind of vectorized them. I made vector versions of the characters, and I uploaded them to iStock to see if I could resell some of this work and get royalties off of the art that I was producing. Well, I uploaded my 8 images, and I was kind of excited about maybe getting a couple bucks and whatnot from these royalties. I wake up the next day and I find an email that says, "You've been selected as Artist of the Week." And I was kind of blown away by this. So I go to the homepage of the website, homepage of iStock Photo, and it says my name, Steve Reed, with one of my illustrations there. And it says, "Check this guy out. We expect to see a lot from him." And I started getting almost immediately job requests. People were downloading my art and I was making royalties off of it. Not very much, but I was getting private messages from people all over the world: Australia, Qatar, UK, Las Vegas, Canada. People that are like, "I love your style, and and your characters, could you design some custom characters for me? So I said, yeah, sure. So $50 here, $150 there. I was selling this custom design work to these different people. And I was starting to make pretty good money and have, getting a lot of clients rolling in. Then they would refer me to other people and I would get all these referrals. And so it was really a great time. I was doing just primarily illustration work, but since things were moving along pretty well and I realized people kind of liked my design style, I also picked up this program called Adobe Flash. And I started my own viral animated series. And that cartoon series started to kind of build steam. But this is how it actually got going. So I had a friend of mine who was also a web developer, and he helped me put a basic website together. And what I did to advertise the cartoon series. So it was based off of a graphic novel that I wrote while I was a missionary. We get one free day a week. And so on my free day, I wrote this kind of graphic novel / comic book thing. And I was using that as my script for the cartoon. And I was trying to advertise local businesses in there because it took place in my hometown. And so I was trying to sell advertising space in the cartoon. So in Flash, you could actually put hyperlinks onto objects to where you can click on them and it would take you to different places. And so I actually had some advertisers in there. And it was a pretty innovative idea, I thought, at the time. But I was still going to college at this time. And so part of the story was about these aliens and they would put people in this state of suspension where they would use them to fight in their wars. That was kind of the plot. And so I made these little business cards and they said, you've been suspended on the front of them. And on the back, it says, you've been warned. And there was a handwritten 4-digit number with a URL. And I would leave these little cards all over the college. I'd stuff a bunch in my pocket and then I would put them in the elevator. I would drop them on a table. I'd leave them all over the place. It was kind of a guerrilla marketing tactic, right? And people would pick it up and they go, oh my gosh, I've been suspended. What does this mean? And it had this alien symbol on the other side. And so they go enter in the URL and they'd enter the 4-digit code to get access to the website to see the cartoon. Now, that 4-digit code, I had a master list of it. And every time I left a card, I would make a note of where I left it. And so I started to notice that if I left a card over here, these cards would get picked up and they'd go to the website more than these cards over here that were maybe left on cars. It was more effective to leave in certain places. So I was able to actually track the location of every single card and start to notice these patterns. And this was really advanced stuff for where I was at the time and some of the things that were going on. And, but it was really successful. It worked really well. And I was able to get a lot of viewers for my cartoon. I got to about, I think, episode 5 when one of my clients who I'd been doing work for was really interested in having me do some custom animation for some of their clients. But before I get there, let me tell you a little bit more about this client. Now, they were one of the first companies to contact me through iStock, and they wanted a custom character designed for their company with the logo on a shirt and everything. He had a blue shirt with a tie, and he was just kind of a generic company guy. His name was Guy, and so this little character, they were very happy with him. They wanted me to design more characters, which I did. Then they said, "Well, do you do icons?" And I thought for a minute, and I didn't totally know what they meant, but I said, "Yeah, of course." I said, "Tell me what you're looking for." And they did. And so I designed some icons. They loved them. And I had to research icons and things like that, but what I produced, they liked. And they said, "Well, do you do web ads?" And I said, "Yes." So I researched web ads and I did some web ads, some skyscrapers, all the different banner ads and things like that I did. And then they said, well, could you make us a promo page? We want to promote one of our products. We just need a promo page designed. I said, yeah, sure. So I put a promo page together. And I said, well, could you help us redesign our website? We need to design a whole website. So I started learning about websites and I said, yeah. So I took on that work, and each skill was building off the next, but I was jumping into these completely new areas and having to educate myself along the whole way. And so I was just stuffing my brain full of knowledge and learning how to do brand new things, all just by going online. There were articles, tutorials, all kinds of things that were just freely available where I could develop all of these skills. I wasn't just coming up with it all on my own. I was benefiting from the knowledge of so many other people who had shared these things. So anyway, this one client, they had me do some animation for them for some other fairly large clients, and then they offered me a job as their art director, and they were going to pay me a salary. And this was pretty mind blowing because this would mean I would have consistent income and a lot more than I was making then. So I accepted, and I became the art director of this startup in Las Vegas. I was working remotely at the time, and this was like 2006 to 2008, somewhere around in there. I ended up moving to Las Vegas. They offered to move me out there, bumping my pay, and to own shares of a startup. And so this was I thought a really great opportunity. So moved out there, started working with a lot of their clients. We were building websites. I was working with some of their developers, and I was their main designer. So I was designing all these websites for major political campaigns, casinos, the city of Las Vegas, doing viral animation, doing stuff for local corporations and businesses. I designed an entire museum exhibit for the biggest union in the United States. My work got featured in Wired magazine, MSNBC. There were so many different victories and amazing things happening. We were working with all these different startup businesses, and it was this time of high energy. I was in my 20s, and we were killing it, doing all kinds of stuff. And to have been selling vacuum cleaners just a few years, actually not really selling any vacuum cleaners just a few years before. And to be where I was with just no background other than what I had taught myself was mind blowing. And I taught myself HTML and CSS at w3schools.com, which is still a good place to go if you want to learn that. And I taught myself HTML and CSS because the guys that were cutting up my design work, they weren't doing things right. The spacing was off, everything. So it's like, I'm going to learn HTML and CSS. I'm going to build the front end and then hand it off to the developers, and then they can implement it. And I got to credit one of my coworkers who gave me this book called The Elements of User Experience, which helped us work with our clients better. So our first clients, they would come to us and say, we want a website, design us a good looking website. And so my first question would be, okay, well, what do you want the website to say? And they said, we'll just design it first, and then we'll tell you what to put in there. And man, we did so many jobs like that. And if you don't know, that's not the way you build websites. You don't do it that way at all. I would end up doing these beautiful designs for them, and they would come back and say, no, it needs to not look like that at all because it has to say this, this, and this. I was like, well, why didn't you tell me that in the first place? And so studying the elements of user experience, we saw that there's a process, a pattern for building websites that you could follow, starting with the strategy and the structure and the scope, and then moving on to the kind of the skeleton and wireframe, and then the design on top of that. And having that model and working with clients on that made me realize how powerful that was and how effective it was. And so building all these websites was a fantastic thing to be involved in. And then 2008, the crash happened. the big housing crash of 2008. And I was in the worst city that you could probably be in during that time. It was devastating, the impact it had on the economy there in Las Vegas. All of these houses, people that we knew, we were renting at the time, thank goodness, but the value of their homes, boom, just bottomed out. Businesses shut down. It was like 4 years until we saw any new houses being built. Crazy, crazy times. But the business was in the middle of transition. It folded and we went our separate ways. So there I was starting from scratch again, away from home, out in Las Vegas. But I had a network of people in my church, in my family, prior colleagues, people that we work with. And so I was able to people still kind of knew about me and what I did. So they would send me work. Oh, you're available for work? Well, here, help me with my business website. And so I did website, logos, print material. So I built a new website for myself and started advertising those things from scratch and just pouring myself into the work and making sure I was giving everyone excellent service and a high quality result at the end, got my name shared and passed on more than anything. I never did any marketing. Even to this day, never marketing, all word of mouth, because I take very seriously the clients that I work with, and I want to make sure they're super happy with what they get. So during that time, joined another startup. They said, name your price to come on board. I did. I knew it was going to fail, but I figured, hey, a year and a half, I could kind of take a break. But I kept my other website up and kept connections with my clients and still did a little bit of work on the side. But and as predicted, that startup folded. But I had made some good connections there still, even though it was a failure. There were many excellent things came out of that. Too many to name. I'm skipping over tons of things that I'll build into future podcasts, but I'm just kind of giving you an overview. So anyway, back to solo again. But then after a period of time, my business is doing really, really well. I'm landing clients. I'm making more money than I've ever made in my life. And it's just blowing my mind. And then I'm invited to enter, it's kind of a revamp of an old startup, and thought it sounded like a good idea. It sounded fun to get involved in that again. So I took that on and still did client work on the side. But here I was again in another startup and working with a lot of really cool people. Ended up being a series of startups that I'm still involved with to this day. But as time continues, I'm getting up to this point. Now I'm getting close to present day where very recently I've been helping my nephew set up a business. We were at the pool in their neighborhood and I'm saying, hey, what's going on in your life? He's 19 and he's like, I want to get into doing programming and build websites and start my own business doing that. And he's kind of thinking of going to school and going through this kind of longer path to get there to do that. And and I told him you could certainly do that, but I said, I can show you how to start a business right now and start selling it without even knowing how to do programming or design or anything like that. And, to his credit, he decided to take me up on that. It's like, okay, how do we do it? So now over the course of the years, I'd helped several other people do this. People coming to me and say, I want to start selling websites. How do I do it? And I was like, well, here's how you do it. Da, 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 da. And I would spend, a couple of weeks with them going through everything. And it took a great deal of my time, but I was happy to do it, happy to help people out. And some of them were adults. They were older than me. They were younger than me. They were kids in high school. But I was helping all different kinds of people do this. And so here I am with my nephew again. And I'm starting to realize at this time in my life just how much knowledge that I've gained and that there's this methodology. Like if I can go back in time to that very first day where I was sitting there in front of my computer for 3 days and say, Steve, do X, Y, and Z. I could have been far more successful, way more than I am now. I'm absolutely positive about that. And so I began to realize that I have something of real value here. So I decided to put together an online course. to help other people learn how to do that. And so I'm just barely getting into it. This is all brand new still. I'm just barely launching this off, but I have a track record. I can look back on my own life and go, I started X, Y, and Z. I started all these things and I was successful. So I know I'm going to start this thing and it's going to be successful. And even if it isn't, I don't care, because I'm going to learn something value from it and I'm going to take it into the next thing that I do. I just never stop going, keep pushing, keep innovating, keep trying, keep risking. It's all moving forward. Even when I've got the best idea, the best plan, it could be completely destroyed. So why not go with something crazy and see if it works, right? Even the best plans don't come out as you're thinking. So sometimes take a chance with those crazy ideas. And anyway, that's what we're going to do again. So, but all during that time, I did all kinds of crazy stuff. I designed and built a chopper recumbent bike from scratch. I had some guy weld it for me. I drew the plans. I went into some bike forums and they said, no, that can't be done. Like the rake on this bike, the angle of the front was 30 degrees. It was insane. It took a ton of upper body strength to keep that front wheel level. But I used to ride that bike around everywhere. It was a 9.5 foot long bike with mountain bike tires on it. It's pretty epic. And, but I had no experience designing bikes, but did it anyway. Why not? Just last year, I bought and gutted an RV that I rent now. And I got that idea when I was building this office here in my attic. I'm sitting in my attic office right now. It's really sweet. I built it with my own two hands, never done anything like this before. I researched all the specs. I did the wiring, the electrical, the lighting, everything. And it's in the attic behind a mirror in the wall. So there's this huge mirror on the outside of the wall of our stairwell, and it's remote controlled. I hit a button, a little remote control clicker, and the mirror swings back into the wall. And then I pull this ladder out and I climb up, pull the ladder back in, close the door, sealed off. It's got really awesome lighting in here that I can control with Siri, my voice, with the phone. And I've got my podcasting studio set up. I've got everything set up here where I can get my work done. And again, no experience, but you can do stuff. And that's kind of the key thing is get out there and make it happen. And so a lot of times in life, I think we can be hesitant to do things. Like, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? What if this bad thing happens? Sometimes you'll take no risks at all. Bad stuff still happens to you anyway. So why not just go out and try something? Go out and do something, and don't be afraid of that failure, because whatever failure that you have, you're gonna learn some things in the attempt to succeed, that even though you fail in the end, those successes and those things you learn will fold into the next thing, and it will keep growing and growing and growing. And to this day, when I look back at all the different things that I've designed billboards, I've designed flyers, flags, like I said, museum pieces. I've done, animation. I've done metallic signs on the side of walls and buildings, and business cards, flyers, print, mail, like all these different things that I've done. I have this massive set of tools, and they were all from things that don't even exist today. They all failed, or they were temporary, but it's all rolled into what I have today. Now I've got this massive skill set. So it's just a matter of starting. And what makes it better is if you've got something to start with. If you have a good plan and something solid you can kind of stand and leap off of, it even better, right? And that's why I'm building this course, is to give people something solid to step off of into whatever future they're going to pursue. They might end up doing websites, logos, and print material for the rest of their life and retire doing that. Or this just might be the springboard they need to pivot into something else. That's perfectly fine too. But it's a starting place. And some people, they lack that starting place, as I did. And there wasn't like a defined place. It just kind of fell in my lap as an opportunity. But I've always tried to take whatever opportunity comes my way and just jump on it and see what happens. And it's risky, but after a while you begin to realize, well, just life itself is risky. It's risky walking down the road. It's risky driving a car, but we do these things anyway, right? So one of my favorite quotes that I'm going to leave you with, this has been kind of long, a little bit longer than I had planned, but I hope that there are some lessons in there. I can certainly delve into some of those more in the future because there are tons of really interesting stories. But one of my favorite quotes is from John Lee Dumas, and he says, "You have to be the disaster before you become the master." And so that's been kind of my mantra ever since I heard that is, hey, be the disaster. You're going to be the disaster first. So just hop into it, accept it. It is what it is. Be the disaster before you become the master. And just kind of feel comfortable in that disastrous state, struggling with what you're struggling with. Because if you dig in and you work your butt off and you look for those opportunities, you're going to attract success to yourself. You'll be successful. And in one way or another, you're going to get it. And you will be rewarded for that effort. So anyway, let's do this. I'm excited. A lot of these podcasts are typically going to be fairly short. I don't want them to take up an entire person's day, but I thought this first one, I should at least tell a little bit of my story and just kind of show some of the background that I have and all the experience that I've collected over the years. I want to share some of that in hopes that it can inspire and be useful to other people. So stay tuned, follow the podcast. There's going to be a lot more really fun stuff on the way. Hopefully we'll get some guests on here someday. There's a lot of really great people that I would like to invite on to discuss different things. We might have some people from the course come on, talk about some of the things they're struggling with and what kind of solutions that could be applicable to whatever business you're in as well. Customer service, negotiation, contracts, things like that. All across the board, we're going to tackle it and it's going to be great. So have a good one. We'll catch you on the flip side. Take it easy.